Your closet is full of people you'll never become. Masks hanging on wire hangers. Identities folded in drawers. Versions of yourself that cost $49, $99, $250. Each one purchased in a moment of hope. Each one worn once, maybe twice, before the illusion cracked. And somewhere in a boardroom, someone who has never met you is counting the profit from your search for a self. This is not a story about shopping. This is a story about who decides who you are. And the answer, if you look at your bank statement, is not you. The average person spends 68% of their income trying to become someone else. Not on shelter, not on food, not on survival, on transformation. On the gap between the face in the mirror and the face they wish the world would see. And that gap, that infinite distance between is and should be, is where fortunes are made, where entire industries thrive, where you disappear, one purchase at a time, into a performance that never ends. They don't call it identity spending in the marketing departments. They call it aspiration. They call it lifestyle. They call it self-expression. But walk through any mall, scroll through any feed, listen to any advertisement, and you'll hear the same promise underneath the pretty words. Buy this, and you will finally be enough. Buy this, and the performance will be convincing. Buy this, and the mask will fit so well that even you will forget you're wearing one. The trick is older than you think, older than Instagram, older than television, older than the American century itself, but it crystallized into its current form in a specific year, in a specific city, in the mind of a specific man who understood something dark about human nature and decided to weaponize it for profit. 1923, New York City, a small office on Madison Avenue. The man's name was Edward Bernays, and he had a problem that would make him rich and reshape the entire economy of desire. Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He had read his uncle's work on the unconscious, on the drives that operate below the surface of rational thought, on the ways people lie to themselves about what they want and why they want it. And Bernays looked at American industry and saw factories producing more than people could consume. He saw warehouses bulging with goods. He saw an economy that had learned to make things faster than human need could absorb them. The old model was simple. You bought a coat when the old one wore through. You bought shoes when the sole separated from the leather. You bought a pot when the handle broke. This was rational consumption, need-based consumption, and it was killing the growth curve. Bernays proposed something revolutionary. He proposed that products should not be sold as solutions to physical needs, but as solutions to psychological needs, to feelings, to anxieties, to the terror of being nobody in a world that demands you be somebody. He started with bacon. The Beechnut Packing Company came to him in 1924 with a problem. Americans ate light breakfasts, toast and coffee, maybe some fruit. The company wanted to sell more bacon, but people simply were not hungry for it in the morning. Bernays did not run advertisements saying bacon tastes good. He did not talk about protein or nutrition or flavor. Instead, he went to doctors. He asked them, "Is a hearty breakfast healthier than a light breakfast?" They said yes. He asked them, "Would bacon and eggs qualify as a hearty breakfast?" They said yes. Then he published the results of his survey in newspapers across the country. 4 out of 5 doctors recommend a hearty breakfast. And by the way, bacon and eggs is a hearty breakfast. Within a year, bacon sales doubled. Bernays had not sold a product. He had sold an identity. The identity of a person who cares about health, who listens to doctors, who makes intelligent choices about their body. You were not buying bacon. You were buying the mask of the health-conscious American. This was the blueprint, and Bernays spent the next 40 years perfecting it. In 1929, he tackled cigarettes. Women did not smoke in public. It was considered unladylike, vulgar, morally suspect. The tobacco companies looked at half the population walking past their product every day and saw wasted profit. They hired Bernays to change the culture. Bernays did not advertise cigarettes. He staged an event, the Easter Day Parade in New York City. He hired a group of young debutantes, wealthy and fashionable, and precisely the kind of women other women wanted to be. He told them to hide cigarettes in their dresses. And at a specific moment, at a specific place in the parade route where he had tipped off photographers, all of them would stop, pull out their cigarettes, and light up in perfect synchronization. He called them torches of freedom. He sent press releases to every newspaper in the city. He framed it as a feminist act, a rebellion against patriarchal control, a statement of independence and modernity. The next morning, photographs of the debutantes smoking appeared on front pages across America, and within weeks, women everywhere were smoking in public, not because they wanted nicotine, because they wanted to be the kind of woman who held a torch of freedom. The product was irrelevant. The identity was everything. Bernays understood what most people still do not understand. Human beings do not have a fixed self. They have a self-concept, a story they tell themselves about who they are, and that story is constantly under threat. Every interaction, every comparison, every moment of doubt erodes the story. And when the story cracks, when the gap between who you think you are and who you fear you might actually be becomes too wide, you feel it like a physical wound. And into that wound, Bernays poured products. By the 1930s, the formula was everywhere. Cars were not sold as transportation. They were sold as freedom, as status, as virility. Soap was not sold as a cleaning agent. It was sold as social acceptance, as romance, as the difference between loneliness and love. Toothpaste was not sold for dental health. It was sold as confidence, as attractiveness, as the smile that would change your life. Every product became a mirror, and the reflection was always the same. The person you are now is not enough. But the person you could be, the person this product will help you become, that person is worth becoming. That person is worth buying. The economy exploded. The Depression hit in 1929, and still, underneath the breadlines and the bank failures, the machine of identity spending kept building. Because even in poverty, especially in poverty, people need to believe they are not just their circumstances. They need the mask. They need the performance. They need something to distinguish them from the crowd of the desperate. By the time the Second World War ended, America had perfected the industrial production of everything except meaning. The factories could make 1 million cars, 1 million refrigerators, 1 million television sets. But they could not make you matter. They could not make you significant. They could not answer the question that wakes you up at 3 in the morning in a house full of things you own but do not need. Who am I when nobody is watching? The answer, according to the men on Madison Avenue, was nobody. You are nobody until you buy the something that makes you somebody. In 1955, a man named Victor Lebeau wrote an article for the Journal of Retailing. He said it plainly, without shame, without euphemism. He said, "Our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction and our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, worn out, replaced, and discarded at an ever-increasing rate." This was not a warning. It was a mission statement. The 1950s became the laboratory. Levittown sprawled across Long Island, row after row of identical houses, each one containing identical families, pursuing identical dreams with identical products. The General Electric kitchen, the Westinghouse washer, the Zenith television, the Ford Fairlane in the driveway. This was not abundance. This was conformity dressed as choice. You could pick any identity you wanted, as long as it was the identity of the American consumer, and beneath the surface, the rot had already started. A researcher named Vance Packard published a book in 1957 called The Hidden Persuaders. He exposed the whole con. He showed how advertisers had hired psychologists to study shoppers the way scientists study lab rats, how they had learned to trigger subconscious fears and offer products as the antidote, how they had mapped the human psyche and turned it into a sales funnel. Packard documented it all: the focus groups, the depth interviews, the subliminal techniques, the deliberate manipulation of anxiety, sexual inadequacy, social fear, and existential dread. The public was horrified. Congress held hearings. Newspapers ran editorials. People demanded regulation, protection, an end to the psychological warfare being waged against them in every commercial break. And then nothing happened. The outrage faded. The hearings ended. The regulations never came, because the economy was growing, and growth required consumption, and consumption required desire, and desire required the gap between who you are and who you wish you were, the gap that products promise to close but never do. The machine kept running, and it got smarter. By the 1970s, credit cards were everywhere. This was the innovation that turbocharged identity spending into the stratosphere. Before credit, you had to wait. You had to save. You had to earn the money before you could buy the mask. But credit removed the waiting. Credit said you could become the person you wanted to be right now, today, immediately, and worry about paying for it later. The banks understood what Bernays had understood 50 years earlier. The gap is unbearable. Waiting makes it worse. Give people the ability to close the gap instantly, and they will pay almost any price for that relief. 18% interest, 22% interest. It did not matter. The mask was worth it. And the masks multiplied. In the 1980s, brands stopped being labels and became tribes. Nike was not selling shoes. Nike was selling athletic transcendence, the possibility that you, ordinary you, could access the same excellence as the superhumans in the commercials. Apple was not selling computers. Apple was selling creative rebellion, the identity of the artist, the thinker, the one who sees the world differently. Ralph Lauren was not selling clothes. Ralph Lauren was selling inherited wealth, East Coast aristocracy, the fantasy that you came from old money even if your parents worked double shifts at the factory. Each brand offered a complete identity kit, not just the product, but the entire aesthetic, the lifestyle, the value system, the personality. You did not buy a pair of Nikes. You bought into the Nike identity, and that identity required constant maintenance. New shoes every season, new gear, new technology, because the identity was not in the object. The identity was in the newness, the cutting edge, the signal to others that you were still committed to the performance. The costs spiraled. The average American household began carrying thousands of dollars in credit card debt, then tens of thousands. Not because of emergencies, not because of medical bills or job losses or disasters, because of identity spending, because the gap had become a chasm, and the only bridge was a piece of plastic with a credit line that increased every time you got close to the limit. By the 2000s, people were spending money they had not earned yet to buy things they did not need to impress people they did not like, and they knew it. Somewhere deep down, in the part of consciousness that wakes you at 3 a.m, they knew the whole thing was a con. But the knowing did not stop the spending, because the alternative, the prospect of standing in front of the world without a mask, was too terrifying to consider. Then the machine evolved again. 2004, Facebook launched. 2006, Twitter. 2010, Instagram. 2016, TikTok. Each one a new mirror. Each one a new way to measure the gap. And here is the genius, the absolute cruelty of the social media age. You are not just comparing yourself to advertisements anymore. You are comparing yourself to everyone, to people you went to high school with who seem to be living in perpetual vacation, to influencers who wake up in linen sheets, in Scandinavian minimalist apartments flooded with golden hour light, to entrepreneurs who retired at 32, to parents whose children never scream in grocery stores, to bodies that do not age, to lives that do not contain laundry or traffic or existential despair. The algorithm curates your inadequacy. Every scroll shows you someone closer to the ideal than you are, someone with a better mask, someone whose performance is more convincing, someone who has spent more, optimized more, tried harder to become the person they are pretending to be. And the algorithm offers you the solution, an advertisement, a sponsored post, a link. The mask you need is always just one click away. The identity you are missing is available for purchase. $49.99, $99.99. Add to cart. Check out. Enter your credit card number. And, for a moment, for the brief window between purchase and delivery, you feel it. The relief, the hope, the belief that this time, this product will finally close the gap. Then the package arrives. You open it, you try it on, and the gap is still there. Maybe smaller, maybe the same size, maybe bigger. Because now you are the kind of person who spent money you should not have spent on something you did not need and still feel exactly the same. So you scroll again, and the algorithm, which has been tracking every click, every pause, every moment of hesitation, shows you the next mask, the next identity, the next promise. The numbers are staggering. The average American now spends 71% of their income on non-essentials. 71%. Not rent, not food, not medicine, on performance, on maintenance of the masks, the subscriptions, the memberships, the updates, the replacements, the things that signal to the algorithm and to the audience that you are still trying, still spending, still committed to the endless work of becoming someone other than who you are. Savings rates have collapsed. Retirement accounts sit empty. Debt climbs into six figures. But the performance continues, because stopping would mean admitting that the whole thing was a waste, that the masks never fit, that the identity you have been purchasing for decades is not real and never was. And here is the most insidious part, the part that would make Bernays smile if he were still alive. You cannot escape by buying different masks. The anti-consumer mask is still a mask. The minimalist identity still requires purchases, specific purchases, the right kind of simple, the right kind of less, the bamboo toothbrush, the refillable water bottle, the capsule wardrobe of ethically sourced basics that cost 3 times as much as the fast fashion you are rejecting. Every rebellion has been monetized. Every critique of consumption has been turned into a brand. You cannot buy your way out of identity spending. The exit is not in the store. So, where is it? Not in another product, not in a better mask, not in a more authentic brand or a more conscious consumption pattern. The exit is in refusal. Refusal to perform. Refusal to measure. Refusal to accept that your worth is determined by what you own or display or signal to an audience that is not paying attention anyway because they are too busy maintaining their own masks. This is harder than it sounds. You have been trained since childhood to equate personhood with purchase. Your entire concept of self has been shaped by people who profit when you feel inadequate. Dismantling this is not a decision. It is deprogramming. It is detox. It is learning to sit in the silence of your actual self without reaching for a product to fill the void. Start with the feeds. Delete them. Not because social media is evil, but because it is a machine designed to generate the gap. Every algorithm optimizes for engagement, and engagement comes from envy, from comparison, from the feeling that you are falling behind. As long as you are scrolling, you are spending. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. The feed is the top of the funnel, and the funnel always ends at your credit card. Then audit your spending. Every purchase for 30 days. Write it down. Not to judge yourself, to see yourself, to observe how much of your money goes to function and how much goes to theater. How much is need, and how much is the need to be seen as the kind of person who needs that thing. Most people who do this exercise discover that 60 to 70% of their spending is identity spending. Masks, layered on masks, layered on masks. And here is the revelation. When you stop buying the masks, you do not disappear. The fear is that without the purchases, without the brands, without the signals, you will become invisible, that you will cease to exist in any meaningful way. But the opposite happens. You become quieter, and in that quiet, you discover something that the economy has spent a century trying to bury. You already are someone, without the performance, without the products, without the constant acquisition and optimization and display. You are not the gap. You are not the distance between who you are and who you should be. You are not a problem that requires a commercial solution. You are the person who exists when no one is watching, when there is no feed to update, when there is no audience to impress, when there is no algorithm measuring your worth. And that person, the one underneath all the costumes, cannot be bought, cannot be sold, cannot be optimized or upgraded or replaced with a newer model. This is the truth the machine cannot afford for you to believe. You are not incomplete. The gap is a lie. The hunger is artificial. The desire is manufactured by people who need you to keep spending so they can keep profiting from your search for a self you already possess. The mask you've been buying, at great expense and greater exhaustion, is not covering an inadequate face. It is covering the fact that you never needed a mask at all. The machine will keep running. The algorithms will keep optimizing. The advertisements will keep whispering. But you do not have to listen. You do not have to participate. You do not have to vote with your dollars for a version of yourself that exists only in the imagination of someone trying to sell you something. You can just be. Without the proof, without the purchase, without the performance. It will feel like falling at first, like losing your footing, because you have been taught that identity requires evidence, that existence requires expense, that being someone costs something. But sit with it. Let the discomfort rise and pass. Let the gap exist without filling it. Watch the desire appear and choose, deliberately, consciously, to let it fade without action. And slowly, something shifts. The masks stop looking like salvation. They start looking like what they always were. Costumes in a play you never auditioned for. Props in a performance that benefits everyone except the performer. And you, beneath it all, begin to feel real.